Hello, everyone. My name is Jeff Bertman. I'm CTO and Head of Engineering and Analytics for Dfuse Technologies. We're a data boutique technology shop. So Dfuse stands for Data Fusion. And today we'll be going over leveraging big data to develop big business with goal, the growth opportunities and actualization lifecycle. It's a methodology. And by the way, for a government audience, instead of growing or developing big business, we're basically talking about growing big success, based on various metrics, KPIs we'll be talking about soon. The first and last slides of the deck have contact information and special links. And before we move forward, let me just say a couple of things. Number one, the deck has a fair amount of glitz. I was director of digital networks and data for Warner Brothers for several years. And I guess that's where the fun factor comes from. And thank you very much for this opportunity to serve the DataCon community again, DataCon LA. By the way, my voice is a little hoarse. It's not the C word, just a lot of talking recently. Okay, moving ahead. So here's the basic agenda. We'll be focusing on the section in the middle that says goal. That's where we're going to spend most of our time. That's the methodology part. Before that, we'll be going over some credentials and setting the stage and general approaches and doing business and things like that. It'll be important in order to get into goal. And then if we have some time at the end, we'll go over some cool and emerging tech relevant to the space. But this is only a 45-minute presentation, so we'll zip through some of these slides, okay? That's what the links are for if anyone has any questions later about some of the things that we zip through. So moving ahead. All right, there is part of the presentation talks about analytic projects, and for that, there's an underlying white paper. There's a link here, and then when we're looking at this deck, if you get a download version of it, it's better to use the PowerPoint show than the PDF because some of the slides are a little dense, but they're revealed in pieces, a little bit at a time. If you just look at the PDF, you can get overload. All right, so getting on to some credentials. Let me move this down. Okay. Yeah, this is my background. I mentioned Warner Brothers. I basically served for many years, Fortune 100, 1,000 companies and federal government, DOD and Department of Justice and so forth. My certifications are AWS and Microsoft, Snowflake and Oracle. And here are some success stories. I'm not going to go over all this stuff, but basically built all of Geico's internet analytics system from scratch, saved Verizon $100 million in a 13-month period, and stuff like that. You'll see later we talk a lot about ROI and total cost of ownership and stuff. Dfuse Technologies. So I mentioned we're a data boutique. People think of us as the data doctors, but one of the obvious credentials is that we're ranked number 84 and number 107 in the Inc. 5000 for IT services and development for 2019 and 2020. And then some other things we already talked about. If you want to dig, you'll have the deck available. And here's a warning about the show business glitz. Okay. All right, now getting into the presentation, one of the first things that we see is a show business example. This was a serene and professional setting, looks like, right? This happened to be a small vacation before this presentation. And something occurred to me during the presentation. So is it really serene? Let's find out. Here's an example of technology, I guess, an elevator. And when we go inside, we can see some more tech, a lot of buttons, and then we've added some tech recently for the pandemic. Here's a hand sanitizer. Sounds good. We're combining technologies. But we take a closer look, something a little fishy is going to go on here. Here's a sanitizer. And I suspect that if we use the elevator buttons, we're going to get a dose of this, whether we like it or not. Here it is, actually. I use my daughter as a guinea pig. And I hope you can hear this. Let's see.
Action.
Now we're going
Reaching for the button.
There you go. You see the squirt?
Okay,
right there. All right, so basically, it's not exactly a disaster, but it's an example of underapplied, misapplied technology, which can be expensive. And that's what we're trying to get around. So here's the abstract. How do we consistently derive big business value from big data, right? And you've already read this stuff, but a lot of it has to do with analyzing and optimizing functionality and ROI and quality, security, scalability, and so forth. And all of this starts with brainstorming. Now, most of my career, or I guess people think of me a lot in the implementation phase, designing from concept all the way through implementation, deploying systems. Before that, there's a lot of brainstorming to decide what are we going to build first. There's competitive analysis, and I have a lot of experience doing this as well. And I figured, you know what, let's make a presentation out of it. That's what this is about. Taking the methodologies that we've used in the past and making it happen, right? Our goal is to produce a lean, hyper-effective, repeatable process to build applications that business needs. Here's a little idea here, right? Beer and diapers. For people familiar with data science and before that, data mining, this was an example of relationships that don't make sense. If we're going to study something, we wouldn't think of a correlation between beer and diapers, even at a retail outlet, a retail store. But it turns out that there is a correlation. People sometimes buy them together for reasons that we wouldn't expect. For example, your spouse calls you and says, hey, stop and get some diapers on the way home. And while you're there, you get the beer, right? So this type of relationship is what we want to find out more about, not just things that are obvious. And keep that in mind as we proceed through the presentation. All right, this is just a little slide about scale. Right, most enterprises these days work with thousands, millions, billions, and really even trillions of whatever. In the case of Warner Brothers, this is the only Warner Brothers slide you'll see, happen to be content creators and obviously video views, aggregates, and so forth. And there's a lot of technology behind it down here. So we're going to keep all of this in mind because these are the enablers behind our business solutions. All right. So our goal right now is to maximize business outcomes by leveraging technology and big data to produce disruptive results, or at least consistently excellent results. One of the key things here is consistency. How to do this. The challenge is, how do we do this with speed and agility? And also we want to balance, pragmatics into the picture. So our solutioning approach will be talking about goal and some setting the stage first, and then something we call hybrid solutioning. Right, here are some details. We don't have to discuss it in this abbreviated presentation. These pillars represent the people and business organizations that we serve. Marketing, sales. Here in IT, these are the parts of the business that we have to make happy, right? Business operations, field operations, legal, security, whoever happens to be our customer. And then, of course, we get into specifics like retail and fraud detection and supply chain and things like that. Down here, we just see that our mission is basically to convert data into knowledge and ultimately into action by leveraging technology and implementing best practices and SLAs. And what we're going to dig into now is a lot of the, the how-to. Down here, we just have some fun stuff about cost benefit and paradigm. I like to say everyone is a customer, regardless of rank. Right. So whether we're talking with a direct stakeholder, the CEO of the company, the developers, or I drive the car in the morning and the custodian says, hey, you have to move your car, before they resurface the lot or something. That person is my customer, right? When you're working in a business environment, just keep that in mind. Now, up here at the top of this Valuescape pyramid, we can see what is our mission: to produce business value. It's not your typical pyramid because it overhangs everything below it. The business value, whether it's for commercial company We're optimizing revenue, profit, market share. For the government, we're talking about mission effectiveness and other efficiencies. And then, of course, for everyone, we can add in ROI and total cost of ownership, quality, security, timeliness, all these other KPIs, right? To make those results happen, we leverage technology. We think about the data and the software together. We govern and manage all of that stuff. We actualize it. This layer is going to be discussed later. And then we finally get our results. At the data level, we take the same type of Valuescape, and we have a little bit more detail here, specific to data. So we have data integration and virtualization, making many different data sources look as though they're all in one place, even though they're not. Ultimately presenting the data, whether it's structured or unstructured. And of course, the same thing, actualizing via dashboards and alerting frameworks and things like that. So just keep this Valuescape in mind. We'll be referring to it later. Now, this is a slide I added recently. It's basically a collection of methodologies that I've come up with over time. And it mirrors this pyramid, right? Up here is where we conceptualize and drive. This basically is where goal, is homed, if you will. And down here is all the implementation work, right? The data science, RPA for robotic processes, different methodologies to make all this stuff happen. And then we plan and guide all of these implementations in order to achieve success. This is where road mapping comes in. So you might hear me talk a little bit about this road mapping methodology called PAR, preemptive agile road mapping, and a systematic way at tackling ROI called the ROI ascendancy model. That's what this slide is about. That's all. Today's focus again is going to be here at the top. Okay, this is just a fun slide. It's kind of a Dilbertish slide, and it shows everyone at the conference table from IT perspective. We have analytics and DevSecOps and governance and so forth. The ROI seat is empty because everyone talks about ROI, but usually we don't do much about it. So one of the things I like to talk about is how can we actually study and achieve ROI in a very simple way. And that's where the ROI ascendancy model comes in. We're not going to dig deeply into it, but it's just to show you here that it's a maturity model, just like CMMI, which a lot of people are familiar with, especially since version 2 came out, and it happens to be a lot leaner than it used to be. Here we start thinking laterally about cost benefit and ultimately have these ROI spheres where we can grow to support your entire enterprise and multiple enterprises if you happen to be a large business. All right, now, before we get into the business, I just wanted to show you a little bit more about the enablers, because this is a technology forum that we're in today. And this is the long way that we're all used to taking data and achieving results with it. For an analytic workflow, it's pretty linear. It's called a data pipe. Now, here are some shortcuts. The purple lines show you what I like to call accelerator patterns, because it is possible to take shortcuts. At the same time, we don't want to produce technical debt. Sometimes when you take a shortcut, you end up with a mess. And that's one of the reasons why data lakes grow into data swamps and you have other anti-patterns. The rest of this slide, so as we're going through our life cycle, we'll be keeping the standard way of doing things and the shortcuts in mind, because the business people always want things sooner versus later, which is a good thing, right? Now, the rest of this slide actually has a bunch of cheat sheet information, just if you want to reference. It shows you where different technology stack layers, appear if you're in AWS as well as Azure. I might have some GCP examples in here as well, in IBM actually. This is a similar model, but it covers operations, transactional systems, as well as analytic systems. So again, you have this type of flow, but now we're also throwing in the environment. Here's where data integration occurs, backups and storage and other things. So it's just a good reference to have. And again, this layer actually introduces a lot of technical details, so you can see where all the different technologies exist. We're not going to dig into that, but it's good as a cheat sheet. Now let's rewind back to the business layer. Okay. All right. So now we're getting into goal. The focus of goal, is to produce the business results that we want. Remember the top of the Valuescape pyramid. And this is the basic approach. We're going to conceive and assess. This is where brainstorming comes in. And then we're going to be ironing out our brainstorm list into a landscape and ultimately into a canvas. And then we plan and build, and we implement and improve our solution. Improve is a key to this. It's not just about getting it out there. It's about sustaining it and continual improvement. Okay, now here is an example of brainstorming, right? Oh, I'm sorry. No, I'm giving you a preview before we get into the brainstorming of what I call the MVU. It's a minimum viable understanding. Everyone's probably heard of MVPs, minimum viable product. Before we get there, this is the MVU. And it has 3 parts. It's based on an industry standard called the Business Strategy Canvas. Sometimes it's called the Business Strategy Model. And I've added a lot of things to it over the years. I like to see things at a glance. So here's cost, benefit, and risk, right, at a glance. I added a SWOT summary, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And a value proposition is already there, but I added some structure to it. Who, what, when, where, why, and how. People might be familiar with the Zachman framework, especially if you're in an idle environment. But for business, it also applies, meaning that you can ask these questions, who, what, when, where, why, from the business perspective, but ultimately you'll have to ask them from other perspectives as well, such as from the developer perspective, from the support perspective, and so forth, because success looks a little different from different angles. And when we talk about validating the proposition, in the template, I build in proactive and reactive approaches. So you can use this as a template. We're going to get into a real world example also. Okay, here's slide 2. There are 3 slides in this canvas. Again, use only what you need. Actually, I guess I forgot to say that. So for a small project, you might not need all this stuff. Right? Now here I've added to the industry standard, I've added risks and unknowns and mitigations and maybe the cost structure. I've definitely added mashups and critical integrations, especially when you're dealing with a data project. I'd like to see the at a glance, what are the data items, and any flags associated with them. So here at the top, we're just, here's a nutshell, short description of what we already saw on the first slide, just for context, right? And these are the different, channels that of our business that are impacted: sales, distribution, communication, and then who are we going to have to partner with, and different resources and dependencies that we have, what customer segments, if we're a business, or what consumers of our technology are involved if you're the government, right? So I'm not going to get into all the details here because we're going to have a walkthrough pretty soon of something real. Sorry for flitting back and forth, by the way. All right, so let's look at the last slide. This is pretty much a dig into the data picture, right? We're looking at our internal and our external data. When I say internal, it's what resources and assets we have available in our current organization. So I might have a data warehouse, I might have an operational system that's involved, whatever it is, and I'm going to have to blend that perhaps with data from the outside. And I've also added SLAs here. Very important to start thinking about them from the beginning, right? And people think about SLAs as, when the system is up and down, but there's a lot to it. You can have SLAs for data quality or any kind of quality for that matter, and for system performance, of course, and for security, which is increasingly important. All right, wake up. Now we're going to get into the real world example I was talking about. All right, for people who've attended some of my past presentations, this is Data Pigeon. You'll see him occasionally. All right, now let's go through the real world use case. So let's say I'm brainstorming and I have this big list here, right? Just a little bit of information about each idea. This one is product development related. This one is kind of marketing expansion plus product development from an add-on perspective and so forth, right? Here's the actual idea, just in a few bullets and nutshells, and then any remarks like, what do we know or not know in particular about this? Do we have TBDs? If there are too many TBDs, then maybe it's not ready for digging yet, right? Now, out of a whole list here, and there could be 50 or 100 in the list, that's why the dots are at the bottom. We've decided we're going to dig into 3 and 4. It so happens that these two seemingly unrelated ideas can actually benefit 2 different types of customers. So I get a lot of bang for the buck this way, right? I can build a system that's focused on natural disaster recovery optimization. And maybe our customer is FEMA, for example, the Federal Emergency Management Agency, and also Warner Brothers, right? Do we want to be able to recover quickly when hurricanes, floods, and other natural disasters come? Absolutely. As a matter of fact, we want to be able to predict where the most damage is going to occur, not just where the storm is going, because there are other agencies already doing that. The National Oceanographic and Atmospheric Association, NOAA. But in this case, we want to take a little bit more data and figure out, which buildings are more susceptible because they're older or don't have the modern codes, and they don't have appliances on the rooftops and things like that. So that's where this technology can come in. There's a little bit of AI to it, natural disaster recovery. Well, guess what? In the entertainment world, they're constantly building and tearing down sets. So the other part of the system expedites a contract workforce to go in and clean things up, right, after a storm. And that type of that part of the system can certainly be used for studios as well. All right, so now let's apply this to the business strategy. Oh, I'm sorry. Before we apply it to the business strategy canvas that we saw before, there's an optional step. This is what I call a PAL, a preliminary assessment list. It's just a little bit more detail to sanity check that this is what we want to do before we dig into the canvas, right? So, you're gathering a few more highlights. You're now looking at the cost, benefit, and risk, right? That's probably the key thing here. When you have several opportunities and you want to look, here, the business opportunity is, for the business, the cost is a 2 on a scale of 1 to 5. The benefit is a 5 on a scale of 1 to 5. That's pretty good. So low cost, high benefit, and the risk is low. It's a 1. From the technology perspective, a little bit more lift, a little bit more effort involved, but still very high benefit and a little bit more risk, right? The value proposition overall is high. And therefore we say, you know what, let's make this a high priority. Same thing here. So you go through your list, and this cost, benefit, risk scale, if you will, is what allows you to stack rank and move ahead with a winning solution, to decide what is going to be disruptive. Out of everything that we discussed, we're going to take number 3 in particular and move forward. Warner Brothers can wait, right? So we're going to focus on FEMA first, especially with all these disasters that are occurring. All right. Now the good thing is that after we've developed the system, we can also use it for Warner Brothers. So now we're ready for the plan and build phase, right? Let's dig into this. Now this is where we get into the canvas, right? We have the same cost, benefit, and risk, and now we filled in some blanks. We can see that this is marketing, how we're going to develop a large niche market and benefit from surges, right? Not benefit from the surges, but basically when a storm comes, there's going to be a surge in business activity. right? And we need this software to accommodate that. One of our goals is going to be to not have contractors price gouging, right? When a storm comes in and people are very needy, contractors can come in from all over the country and help, but then the price gouging goes on. It's not really compatible with the insurance companies, trying to keep costs at a level scheme. So there's a lot of tangent benefits to the system. This does require product development. Now, in this particular case, we're tacking it on to an existing software package. We actually have a specific package lined up for this, but for the purposes of this presentation, I'm keeping it generic. I'm just calling it TAV, right? I don't remember what it stands for, but I think I defined it on a previous slide. But let's just call the system TAV. It's basically a generic name for the application that we're going to enhance, right? Now, for the SWOT summary, we can see we've documented strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats. I'm not going to get into all those details, but you can see what we do to call things out at a glance. Sometimes we have to verify. In this case, we have to verify that the current market cap is significantly open. Blah blah blah. We also want to highlight the fact that this can be disruptive. We can get in there before our competition. Packaging options we want to verify. We've done our who, what, when, where, why analysis, and we've actually shown that we can validate this in a proactive as well as a reactive way. Okay, on the second board, we've filled in details for the risks and the mitigations, right? First, we want to determine, this commercial package that we've decided to use hasn't been applied to the government space before. So one of the risks is that they might have to become a government contractor. There's a process for that. They might have to register for a cage code and things like that. So that's a risk. It should be documented. And then, these other typical types of risks. Mitigations, how are we going to do this? We're going to register for the cage code. We're going to handle surges and all these things. So basically, we want a mitigation for every risk. Is what it boils down to. So A, B, C, D, A, B, C, D. Simple as that. Who are our partners going to be? Well, we're definitely going to partner with the Federal Emergency Management Association we talked about before, FEMA. And then they already partner with a lot of insurance companies. They have special names for those insurance companies in scenarios like this: direct servicing agents, write your own companies. But basically, they're typical commercial insurance companies that we all know and love. And then the resources that we need. So we have some in-house people, and the technical roles, so business and technology should be covered, right? And then the customer segments. Basically, we're talking about recurring business that is situational, for example, based on disasters. And then we also have recurring business. For example, once a homeowner or a business owner of a building establishes a relationship with a contractor who helped them out in a crisis, they might use that contractor in the future for routine maintenance or warranty work, that type of thing. So we're identifying things that will show value to our partners over here. So when we're putting the whole business deal together at a glance, we can see what points we're going to need to motivate what people. Okay, so the cost structure, value driven, they're different, cost structure, specifics in the industry. I'm not planning on getting into the detail here. How are we going to monetize this thing? It is a recurring revenue, and we can also make a subscription model. For example, the contractors want to sign up for this and say, hey, if I subscribe, then whenever storms come in, I'm automatically going to be called. So that's a potential subscription model as well. And then the mashups. Okay, so now let's dig into the mashups on the next slide. All right, so here's the data. right? So internally in this application, it already has a contractor network. So when we bring this to the government will automatically see, wow, you already have like 100,000 contractors across the country. Maybe that's overdoing it. Maybe it's about 50,000, but it's a lot, right? So that's great. Now the government, it's just one good selling thing for the government. What types of assets and add-ons and validations. I think I talked before about selling points to our partners, but then we can also call out bonuses, if you will. In this case, a bonus is that when we blend all of this data that we're going to talk about, we can actually resell that data to other companies or other organizations because we're combining data in a unique way that is not a common commodity. Basically, it's something that we can sell, and if it's brand new, it can be a disruptive type of sell. If it's a well, basically any way we can sell it, that's a good thing. That's the bottom line. All right, now the data that we're getting externally, right? Here we're lining up what are the purposes. So, and the patterns, right? Because eventually we want to set the stage for design patterns when it gets into the more detailed technical design phases. And by the way, this is somewhat of a technical, slide. So I wouldn't necessarily show this to the business people. This is where we're starting to, deeper dive. So we're lining up the contractors for pre-disaster and post-disaster claims, right? Pre-disaster is we're targeting early alerting system. So you'll see in the workflows that we're going to show later, when the storm is approaching, we want to line up contractors so everyone's ready and they're focused on a certain geography where the most damage is going to occur. That's the pre-disaster targets. We're lining up the contractors. Storm hasn't hit yet, but we want to be ready. And then, of course, after the disaster comes, we have the actual claims that are coming through, and we need to process them. It's going to be a huge surge. We need to be able to scale all that. So how do we set the technology to make all this stuff happen and to scale properly, right? And this is where we have the medium to very high velocity and volume come in as far as the patterns are concerned. Medium velocity for pre-disaster and obviously very high velocity for after the storm comes in. With an earthquake, it's not exactly the same. Earthquakes you have less notice. So we're focusing more on storms and floods and things like that. And then what are the interactions before, the pre-disaster phase and the post-disaster phase? And without getting into too much detail here, based on limited time, I'm going to skip down here to the sources, data sources. So FEMA is a critical data source. You list all your critical sources here. And then we also prefer to get data from other places. We want to combine data with NOAA because NOAA is showing us where the cone of a storm is going to hit. But then we want to juxtapose that data with different databases that know about property, like CoreLogic, for example. These properties, like I was talking about before, have their appliances on the roof, like their air conditioners on the roof. So if it's a flood, there's going to be less damage, right? Certain properties have blow-away walls. So during a storm, the less important walls blow away to preserve the integrity of the structure so the whole house doesn't blow down, right? Those are types of codes that you can identify. You get this data from other places and blend it together. And that's what I'm saying, this bonus, right? Now that we're blending all this data together, not only can we use it, but we can sell it. All right. Now, this is a little bit more detail. It's something that you would not show business people, certainly, but ultimately the products of this, we would show business people. So this is how we're producing our business requirements document and our product requirements document, and different workflows. So it's basically a little inventory of the types of things that we're going to put into our design documents that are upcoming. All right, this is the document requirements. And for the actual solutions, same type of idea here. and we're going to implement agile practices and so forth. All right, now we're going to show the workflow. All right, this is an existing system, remember. So we have, actually I have the steps here on the right-hand side, right? But keep in mind we have swim lanes. The software in the middle is the application that we're enhancing. And the blue boxes indicate existing processes. The green boxes indicate things that we're adding to the system. And also new data interactions that didn't exist before. And then we have numbers to help guide the flow. You can follow the arrows, but the numbers make it kind of more concrete. And keep in mind here, there are optional processes as well, right? All of this is described in the steps and the options on the right-hand side. Bottom line is this, in order to be competitive, you can actually bid, different claims across different contractors, right? So there's a bidding process. Almost like an auction, it's like a claim comes in and boom, contractors bid. This will keep them price competitive. At the same time, we have an emergency. If that proves to be an obstacle, then we can skip it. And the workflow allows us to work either way. And we might not even build this bidding, module until later. So here's the basic flow. You have the natural disaster. We start, and we've already done some prediction. Then we start booking contractors. We obviously have to, feed the data with the optional bidding process, and then we have to schedule and dispatch, and then the field activity. And we have some red TBDs here. Again, we want to call out good news, like, hashtag bonus, and we want to call out things that aren't settled yet. And over a period of time, eventually these, hashtag TBDs get resolved. But it's okay. It's a living document. When you're producing, these specs, it's okay to highlight the bad news because you have to resolve it. This is just an outline of the actual data interactions. Inbound data we feed, and now we're getting into definitely technical details here. We're going to use RESTful APIs. We can feed from CSV or JSON. We might use webhooks, so we don't have to pull the data. For high velocity situations, we're probably going to use Kafka. Or if you're in AWS, Kinesis and so forth, or Azure Stream Analytics, same thing. And then, we just have these additional steps. We're going to pass through this because of time. All right, now, let's say it's an analytics project. One way to solve this is a die-hard methodology called ChrisDM. And it basically involves business and data understanding and then producing some kind of analytic system. We prepare the data, basically ETL, we model the data in machine learning terms, and then we evaluate the success, and if it's good, then we deploy. It's kind of a one-way process, and it's designed for one-off situations. This is the methodology I was talking about. If you're dealing with an analytics project, you can read this white paper, and it talks about how to modernize this approach. And by the way, there are other modernization attempts at ChrisDM. Chris happens to stand for the Cross-Industry Standard Process for Data Mining. And there are different methodologies from Microsoft and other vendors. I happen to like Microsoft's the best, but they tend to be tied to their tool sets. And for that reason, people still use ChrisDM today. And whenever I'm sitting down at the table, okay, let's start a new data science project. Okay, what are we going to enhance about CRISP? How are we going to accommodate scalability and quality by design and privacy by design and security by design and things like that, continual improvement? Well, one day last year, I just say, you know what? I'm just going to start a new baseline and call it SEAL, and that's what SEAL is about, right? Scalability, integration. In enterprise, we have a lot of hooks, right? So SEAL allows you to acquire the data, but when we're modeling it, we might use machine learning, but we also might use democratized analytics. So there's a way to do that. We want to make sure that we scale the model before we deploy it to make sure that it's going to be viable, in a volume like the disaster recovery system we're talking about. That's It's, that's going to have huge surges. We have to be able to test that before it goes out the door. After it goes out the door, we're going to monitor. And it's not just monitoring for, performance or uptime and things like that, but in an AI world, you're also monitoring model drift. After a while, your data, it was on target for a while, but now it's not on target anymore. Why? Because it might have been seasonal data, because some of the columns in your data were not applicable, and over time they caused noise, or you might have to change your model, things like that. So SEAL takes into account all that stuff. Oh, and if you look at the white paper, there's a bunch of callouts. I also have a companion deck available upon request. Here are some links. All right. So that was the bulk of the presentation, just on time. There is some cool and emerging tech I'd like to cover, just to make a few callouts. And one of them has to do with continuous innovation, not just continuous improvement, right? Because we've been talking about brainstorming and growing your business and making disruptive decisions, that they're going to grow business or grow success in the government case. So how do we do this, right? Now, here's a kind of busy slide. These are, again, the technology enablers. It's kind of a cheat sheet. It allows you to see where the technology fits in to a certain use case. So this is a data journey designed for, health-related industry. That's why some of these examples happen to be, patient data, historic events, but it could be really any business. And the purple lines, once again, represent how we can take shortcuts, but maintain success long-term, not build technical debt. Here's our analytics toolkit. So you can see at a glance, what do we use to analyze data, and what do we use specifically for machine learning? Right, I'm going to zip past this. Remember, we said at the beginning, we're going to zip past some of these things. Let me just give you a few previews of technology that fits into these pictures, right? So Alteryx. Alteryx is a fantastic citizen data science platform. It's Gartner MQ leader, and it allows traditional business analysts to achieve data scientist type results. But also data scientists can use the same platform. You can share data assets and workflows between the formal data scientists and the business analysts. It's pretty cool. Data robot. Remember, we talked about model drift before in the monitoring phase of SEAL, right? In this quadrant up here, right here. Okay, in this monitoring phase, when our predictions start turning awry, for example. Well, let's go back. Data robot is great for that. Although I'm calling out data robot twice in this presentation, I think this is where we're talking about the model drift. Yeah, here's where we're talking about the model drift. That quadrant on the left-hand side of the SEAL diagram discusses DevSecOps. And there's where we do the monitoring, but not just for physical performance or for outages and things, also for the model. The same tool can be used earlier in the life cycle here to perform what's called AutoML, automatic machine learning. So basically in the machine learning process, you have a data scientist who's skilled in saying, okay, we have this type of data, we need a supervised model or an unsupervised model, maybe a deep learning, type of model based on image recognition or whatever. And there are many, many choices across all those things. If we're going to do cluster analysis or whatever. So Data Robot, instead of a lot of trial and error, automates this process for you and saves a lot of time. Now, some of these data engineering tools are worth mentioning here. There's a Send, which is a data engineering lifecycle. It kind of boosts your whole lifecycle. It's kind of like other tools, Fivetran or Illuma or Del Bloomy. But the nice thing about it is that you can use basic SQL code and Python code instead of choosing all these proprietary widgets. Actually, people might be familiar with Apache NiFi, right? So Ascend is kind of like Apache NiFi on steroids, and it's all SaaS. It's a managed platform. You don't have to install anything. Denodo is a data virtualization tool. Earlier in the presentation, we were talking about making data from many different places look like it's all in one place. That's what Denodo comes in. And they also have a data catalog to go along with that. There's a low-cost product that's more of a startup product called Liftron that is on its way to become another Denodo. Right now, it's incredibly mature for a startup, and we get a lot of bang for the buck. And there's some other tools here. Unfortunately, we don't have time. So winding down, fairy tale wrap up. All right. This is one of the books that I read to our daughter, Dora the Explorer. This is what we're looking for, right? Everyone's happy and smiling. Life is perfect. You know, here's Boots smelling a flower. Everyone's really happy, right? You look a little bit closer, though. You see, is it really perfect? There's a leak there in the hose. So the bottom line is success doesn't have to be perfect. It just needs to be excellent. And that's where ROI comes in. All right. Here are the credits to Bob Roper, the illustrator of Dora the Explorer. Probably many illustrators, but that was the illustrator for that particular slide. Now would be a good time for questions and answers, but this is not a live presentation. Here's the contact info I mentioned. And thank you very much, Subhash and the whole DataCon LA team. And the viewers, our audiences are, of course, the most important. Success. There we go. All right, take good care. Thank you.